Welcome to the Freedom for Ocalan Report. It is Wednesday, the 27th of January. This is a production of the Trade Union Freedom for Ocalan campaign, which is a campaign to lobby for the civil rights of the Kurds, but specifically to lobby for the freedom of the Kurdish political prisoner Abdullah Öcalan as the first necessary and vital step towards peace, not only for the Kurds, but the whole region. If you want to support the creation of more content like this, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Freedom for Ocalan. If you want to support the campaign more directly and you're a trade unionist or you're involved with a political organisation, you can affiliate your branch or region or committee or even national trade union. And you can do all of those things by going to freedomforocalan.org. Also, finally, really important, if you could like and subscribe this video, that really helps us. And of course, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Ocalan3. For this programme, I'm really delighted to be joined by our special guest, Viyan, who is an internationalist with the Kurdish Freedom Movement. Viyan spent a year in Rojava as an internationalist, and since returning to the UK, continues to organise alongside the Kurdish community and solidarity groups. While in Rojava, she spent time with the Make Rojava Green Again campaign, the women's movement, and worked at a press centre during the 2019 Turkish invasion. So we're really pleased to have her with us to put into context and to talk about some of the news items that are affecting the region right now. Viyan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Viyan, the Make Rojava Green Again. I wonder if you could sort of explain what that is for some of our viewers.
Mm-hmm. The Make Rojava Green Again campaign is a campaign that was launched by international volunteers in Rojava in partnership with the local movement and local administrations in order to kind of lift up the ecological sides of the Rojava Revolution. As a lot of people know, the Rojava Revolution is based on three pillars: women's liberation, radical democracy, and ecology. And so that ecological pillar is really important to the campaign, and it takes part in all sorts of activities like tree planting, helping preserve natural reserves, kind of beautifying the sort of green areas and green spaces in nearby cities so they're more accessible to the local community, and working with local neighborhood councils in order to set up community gardens and community orchards and community tree nursery projects.
That's incredible. And you were there for, was it the majority of 2019?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was almost all of 2019 coming into 2020 a little bit.
So it must have been coming back to the UK and then almost immediately us going into the COVID crisis and lockdown. I mean, coming back anyway must have been a bit of a kind of a cultural shift for you. But then to deal with the lockdown, how's that been? How has that affected your organising?
Well, of course, it's been, quite a big transition. The funny thing about going into lockdown is in some ways it actually gave me the space to reacclimatize to life in the UK in a way that kind of going full back into life as normal wouldn't have. So in some ways, there was definitely a silver lining. And I've certainly been really lucky with the people who are organizing here, both solidarity activists and in the Kurdish community, in order to, express solidarity across all of Kurdistan, including the Rojava region, and fighting for freedom for Ocalan and in support of other political prisoners. So there's a really strong solidarity network in the UK called the Kurdistan Solidarity Network, and we've been just doing a lot of online educations, online meetings, and outreach to local groups in order to get people to not only support kind of Kurdistan and Kurdish people in Kurdistan, but also to learn from the movement and the revolution, because it's so inspiring and so powerful, and arguably one of the most hopeful things that we can look to around the world right now in terms of a radically progressive social movement that has a lot of successes under its belts and a lot of things we can learn from.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thank you again for being here today and to help us sort of, I guess, understand the context behind some of these news items we're going to talk about. So without further ado, we'll move on to the first story. And I think there's other stories and there's other, as I think we'll probably discuss, there's events that have happened very recently that also have a bearing on this. But I'd be really fascinated to get a bit of understanding from your perspective about the sort of background to this. So this is a story from ANF English, which is a Kurdish news site, and this was from Thursday, the 21st of January. And it's from the Syrian Women's Rights Protection and Research Center. Really shocking report on the crimes committed in Afrin under the occupation, and revealed here that 66 women were massacred, more than 149 abducted, 178 others tortured and harassed by the invaders. The invaders, of course, being Turkey, who the Turkish state and their proxy mercenaries. Whilst you were there in Rojava, well, what was the impact of this? How is it understood? How do we frame this?
Yeah, the invasion and ongoing occupation of Afrin is, of course, something that weighs incredibly heavily on a lot of people across all of Kurdistan. And that was then, of course, compounded by the invasion and ongoing occupation of the region around Serikania and Tal Abyad in 2019. And it's really seen as part, not just two isolated instances, but part of an ongoing campaign to try to destroy the political project in North and East Syria and try to undermine the autonomy and, freedom for women and the anti-fascism that the Rojava Revolution embodies, and which, is really sisters with the movement for democratic and federalism in Southeast Turkey, in northern Kurdistan, within the borders of Turkey. So, I think the Turkish state very much sees these two democratic, radical political projects as very linked, and it does see that to weaken one is to weaken the other. And Rojava has become an increasingly strong administration internally, as well as a beacon of hope internationally. So that is seen as a threat in many ways to the very, very fascist tendencies, frankly, within the Turkish state. So I think that's really important to bear in mind as part of that bigger picture. In terms of, it's interesting, that you asked me about that, because sort of the invasion of Afrin was when the Kurdish movement and my life collided, because the reason I got involved in all of this is because a really good friend of mine, Anna Campbell, was killed in Afrin. She had gone to Rojava to fight with the YPJ and was killed by Turkish airstrike defending Afrin against invasion. So that really brought it into my life and very much into my heart, and was a huge factor in me deciding to go to Rojava and spend some time with the movement there. So, it is really from beginning to ongoing a war against women. And we really see that in Afrin, and we see it now in the occupied areas of Serikania and Tal Abyad as well.
And Anna, I mean, just to, I think some of the people watching this will probably be from the UK trade union movement, and will be acutely aware, sort of part of the, I don't want to say mythology, that's the wrong word because it's real history, but part of the shared identity of the trade union movement is its support for the Republican cause in the Spanish Civil War nearly a century ago. And of course, Anna wore the patch of the Republicans. I think something else that's really important, and this is touching on something that we found out about at the weekend, which is two Kurdish political leaders, women as well, but also political leaders who were captured and horrifically murdered by ISIS sleeper cells. I mean, you mentioned the invasion at the end of 2019. Of course, that invasion was almost a de facto rescue mission of ISIS. The Turkish state, the first thing that they did was bomb prisoner of war camps that were holding ISIS combatants captive. I think a lot of Western audiences possibly don't quite understand the present threat of ISIS. They think that it ended with Raqqa, but we know that that's not the case. I wonder if you could sort of talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, one of the biggest challenges facing the democratic administration in northeast Syria, in Rojava, is the ongoing threat of ISIS sleeper cells, which can always be in the process of regathering into a powerful force. And we see that also across the border in Iraq, that actually in some areas, ISIS is making a resurgence. And in north and east Syria, for as long as the democratic administration can, provide like basic humanitarian needs, basic political stability, a functioning economy, like people will turn away from ISIS. But at the same time, there are some diehards out there who continue to organize and continue to plan these attacks, like the 2 assassinations that happened last weekend. But this is really ongoing. There were also, there's assassinations constantly. There's, car bombs going off. In the time that I was in Rojava, there were, every few weeks you'd hear an explosion, and it would be a car bomb or a motorcycle bomb that was often claimed by ISIS or other jihadist groups. And it's, again, like, as you said, really important to see that link with the Turkish state. There was the recent Rojava Information Center report that was released that identified, at least 40 former ISIS commanders or fighters who are now on Turkey's payroll and who are now really active in the occupation and, so-called administration of the occupied territories in Tal Abyad and Serikania. So we really see a lot of overlap, and we have since the beginning. And I think a lot of people think, okay, well, Turkey, that's a state, that's a government, and then give it a certain kind of legitimacy and sort of give it the benefit of the doubt. But we really see it as a very fascist state, and as a state that's really sliding into, has already slid into someplace quite dangerous, and can be a threat for not just kind of this small area in which it exists, but for the wider region. We already see a lot of Turkish intervention across all of the Middle East and into the Mediterranean. And this is a huge threat, and I'm personally of Polish heritage. And, for me, there is this really terrifying echo of the past of, the, Nazi-led Germany, that it was this like slide into fascism, which was just like ignored and appeased until it was really too late.
And of course, I mean, it's really important you raise that, because obviously when you look at, I mean, it's sometimes clumsy just to sort of draw a direct parallel with Nazism in Germany, but I think it is important. People often assume that Hitler's project was, it was purely ethno-nationalist, but actually, it was against all sorts of other progressive forces. And similarly, I think you see in Turkey a situation where, yes, the Kurds are absolutely persecuted, but I've heard Diyarbakir, obviously predominantly Kurdish region in southern Turkey, is described as a laboratory of oppression. So what the Turkish state perfects against its Kurdish population, it then uses against trade unionists, it then uses against socialists and feminists and academics and journalists and artists. So I think it really is important to draw those parallels. And you talked about the dangers of this aggressive expansionist Turkey, which I think probably leads into the next item that I wanted to talk to you about, which is, this is from Medyan News, and it's a call from the Afrin Human Rights Organization, and they're really appealing to the UN, stop the attacks on Tal Rifat. And yeah, again, as you pointed out, this is sort of Turkish state-backed and affiliated armed groups who are committing innumerable war crimes and human rights abuses in the region. What would you, I mean, there's been, obviously, we've seen recently COSATU, the South African trade union organization, has spearheaded a kind of letter writing campaign to the UN. What would you like to see the UN or other international groups do?
I mean, that's a really big question. And
Sure.
In some ways, it's two different questions, right? There's what would I like to see them to do, and what can we expect them to do? And certainly, while we were in Rojava and the Turkish invasion was ongoing in 2019, there was, a part of my brain that was waiting for the United Nations to kind of swoop in and fix everything, and to like implement a humanitarian corridor, or to facilitate a ceasefire agreement, or to put pressure for like no-fly zones and so on. And it didn't happen because the United Nations isn't currently a political vehicle that is willing to do that. And if you also look at, NATO and Turkey being a NATO member, that's also another limitation on that international body to take any meaningful action, which would curtail Turkey's, very Kurdish, anti-freedom, anti-woman agenda across the region. So I think in some ways it may be a more useful question of kind of like, what can we do, like as citizens, as humans who look at what's happening there and go, that's not okay. We don't stand with Turkey, and we also don't stand with this kind of like United Nations, like we can't do anything about it kind of vibe. And I think we do need to be putting pressure on international institutions, but we also need to be building up a really powerful grassroots movement that's really uncompromising in its demand that we stand for humanity, and we stand with those who fought for humanity and who defended humanity against Islamic State and other jihadist forces. Some of the only successful resistance against ISIS came from those Kurdish-led forces, the YPG and the YPJ, which now kind of come under the Syrian Democratic Forces military umbrella. If it weren't for those people and for the 10,000 people who died in that struggle, by now, we ourselves will be feeling that effects a lot more. And we all have, most of us do live in cities which have seen, ISIS attacks and massacres, which are horrifying. And yet, when it comes down to it, our governments are letting the people who fought against ISIS, who defeated ISIS for all intents and purposes, leaving them behind, and then also selling weapons to the Turkish state, who then use it to massacre further people. So I think it's one of those things that we need to be thinking about. What are our political solutions? Like throughout all of my time in Rojava, most of the folks from the movement there knew that we would head back to wherever we came from, to the UK or America or France or Germany or Spain. And they would just always say, build up your social movements where you're from, push back the forces of, neoliberal capitalism where you're from, create accountable political institutions. And that's, part of what we're doing here, like in the UK, through the work that we're doing is actually building up the kind of democratic political society that is able to stand up for itself and stand with people around the world who are fighting for freedom and democracy.
Moving on to civil rights in Turkey, if that's okay. I want to talk about this. This didn't happen recently. Unfortunately, this happened towards the end of last year in December. Leyla Guven, of course, who is a very prominent Kurdish politician in Turkey with the People's Democratic Party (HDP), has been sentenced by a court in Turkey to 22 years in prison on terror charges, which is fairly typical of the treatment of Kurdish politicians. It's the assumption is that if you're Kurdish, you must be a terrorist. So if you're a Kurdish politician, you must be, it is legitimate to target you with the courts. You talked a bit about kind of international pressure. How do you think we can help Leyla and politicians like Leyla, of course, Selahattin Demirtas, also one of the co-chairs of HDP, also awaiting trial, and I think they're proposing that they would sentence him to 142 years, 140. I mean, an absurd amount of time. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's again this similar thing of like, on the one hand, what are we pressuring decision makers to do? And from the stance of like being in the UK, like not selling arms to Turkey is a pretty big sort of ask that we're asking, because that kind of enables Turkey's sort of like political military project, which is really based on the oppression of the Kurdish rights activists within Turkey, right? So I think we need to see it, yes, as a domestic kind of issue around like civil liberties and so on, but it also feeds into this kind of like wider military project that Turkey's waging across the region. So I think, the Turkish state does need to be more democratic. It needs to stop destroying not just the HDP, but pretty much any form of democratic resistance. But the current political ideology of the ruling party is a very kind of fascist, ethno-nationalist, authoritarian one. So again, I think it is about like expressing that solidarity. Yes, as much as possible, democratic reforms. There's 6,000 HDP activists who've been in jail for the past sort of 10 to 15 years. There's constant rounding up of community organizers, teachers, as you said, academics, activists, artists and musicians and pretty much anybody who dares to like put a toe out of line and like speak out against the Turkish state. They keep on, forcibly removing democratically elected mayors from the HDP and replacing them with government officials. So I think it's very disheartening, because it does kind of feel a bit like, how do you ask a very undemocratic state to suddenly become democratic? Which again, like, I guess brings us back to like, how do we build solidarity? How do we strengthen the resistance over there from where we are here? And there's a really great campaign going on now where people are writing letters and postcards to Leyla Guven to kind of like give support and solidarity in some ways. While Leyla Guven was on hunger strike, the year before last, the representative from the Mothers of the Plaza del Mayo in Argentina, which came about in a response to a fascist dictator in Argentina, right? They came to visit her and to kind of give support and solidarity. And I think this kind of thing, again, is quite intangible, but it's just one example of how we can actually lend our strength and in many ways our moral support to the amazing political organizing and resistance that's happening there. And yes, from where we are here, like applying that pressure as much as possible.
Do you see any sort of, I guess, like successful campaigns in the past of a kind of similar scale? I mean, I'm thinking things like the anti-apartheid movement and stuff like that. Do you think there are things today that we can learn from those movements?
I think definitely yes, and a lot of that learning is ongoing. For example, there is a Boycott Turkey campaign, which is currently trying to pressure people to, for example, avoid going to Turkey for tourism, for holidays, to avoid Turkish Airlines, which has a large sort of government-owned share of the company. And yeah, definitely like check out the Boycott Turkey website for where the campaign is at and what they're currently urging people to do. And I think it's really important that we kind of, look at those boycott, disinvestment sort of sanctions approach that we've learned from the anti-apartheid movement, and also that we can look at the Palestine solidarity movement as well and look at those tactics there and how they've worked. So that's, definitely a multifaceted approach is going to be necessary.
And just thinking about the kind of geopolitics of Turkey and kind of how it's positioning itself. Actually, I do want to go back to something else, because I think this does kind of relate to this, and I think you probably this does tie back to what you were talking about with the Make Rojava Green Again campaign, which is we've talked about it on this program before, but I wanted to discuss with you. So this is a story from Egypt Independent, but I think it was syndicated from Deutsche Welle. And it's posing the question, I think quite rhetorically, are water supplies being weaponized by Turkey? Obviously, Turkey kind of sits at on the Euphrates and the Tigris, which, as we look at climate change, are going to become hugely even more important resources as the century goes on. But this is specifically about. It mentions 1 million people in the Kurdish governed region, which is about a fifth of the people in Rojava, isn't it? Rojava is about 5 million people.
Yeah, it's 4 to 5 million people. Yeah, so it's a big percentage.
A huge number of people, and they've again had their water supply cut off, and they're saying here this is 20 times in the past 12 months. Is this kind of fairly typical of the sort of thing that Turkey does? I mean, it seems like they will do absolutely anything they can to undermine the stability of the region.
Yeah, unfortunately, is quite typical over the past 5 years. There's been regular, actions by the Turkish state to cut off or reduce water flow coming into Syria and Iraq. And we've kind of seen that, from 2015, particularly in 2017, there was a lot of cutting off of the Euphrates into North Syria, and which has a big effect on drinking water and energy generation from the dams in that region as well. And then, in 2019, from the most recent Turkish invasion, there was the targeting of the Aluk water station repeatedly, which then was kind of repaired and then destroyed again and repaired and destroyed again. And this is a major water station that feeds into a very highly populated region, including some of the biggest cities. And I had a lot of friends who were in the city of Hasake at the time that the water was kind of constantly being cut off. And they would say, you never know when the water's going to come back on again. And there's already very irregular water supply in Rojava because of electricity and energy generation, because of, it's a region that's been quite war-torn for a lot of the past couple of decades. And it kind of steadily gets better. But then with the most recent invasion, it got worse again. And the quality of water kind of coming out of the taps can be like, I saw a lot of photos of like really yellow brown water coming out, and just like, yeah, lack of access to drinking water. And the democratic administration of the region comes in with trucks and like fills up people's water bottles and tanks and so on, but that's not really sustainable in any way. So I think it definitely is a weaponization of the water supply. Particularly, you're kind of looking at the times where there is a global pandemic. What's access to water? How is that going to affect people's health as well? Ability to stay in the house too, where you can access water to drink instead of having to go out and find water to drink. And also connected, I guess, there's the damming of the Tigris with the Ilusu dam, which then like has now flooded the ancient like village of Hasankeyf and significantly reduced water flow into Syria and particularly Iraq as well. So I think in general, Turkey is disregarding, the rights of people who live downstream, and they're using this excuse of like, oh, regional economic development and economic growth, but actually what they're doing is making those people homeless, often destroying a habitat that those people actually relied on for livelihood and for home, and then also like making their families who live downstream like not have enough water or energy.
And also, I guess it's an attack on Kurdish identity and culture as well, isn't it? Because these are, these are historic villages that they are just kind of flooding. So they get to fulfill that, even though it's not overtly stated, that policy objective of kind of eroding Kurdish history and identity. Something that really struck me, and I think there's real parallels with Öcalan, is the way that they kind of hide behind bureaucracy in a weird sort of way. So I'm thinking of some of the trade unionist leaders that went on the Imrali delegation, which is the annual delegation, the peace delegation, to try and visit Abdullah Öcalan, which is his right. It's the right of people to see him, but of course is denied most of the time. But they were telling us that the bureaucracy that ran Imrali prison would say things like, "Oh well, of course you can visit him, but the boat's broken, so you can't." Or the weather's too bad. And hearing some of the reports from, what they've said about Aluk is oh no, we're not. It's the engineers have made a mistake. It's this sort of bureaucratic, almost sort of attack as well, which I found quite interesting. I want to talk now about this is a story from Jivaka Azad, which is I think it's a German Kurdish organization, and very interesting piece about the Turkish charm offensive and how it could be trying to give them the political space to begin a new war in southern Kurdistan in Iraq. And I wanted to talk about this story on its own merits, but also they do talk about, and you did touch on this before, they also talk about the pressure that the Erdogan government is under from the right, so from the sort of ultra-nationalist party, the Republican People's Party, the CHP, to ban the HDP. And the context around that. So there's a couple of things here. It's how Turkey is sort of interacting with the outside world politically, but also what it's doing internally. And I know you've already touched on that a little bit, but I wonder if you could talk about those two things a little bit.
I think it's a really interesting dynamic because, the HDP is a party that, is active within the political system, but has actually managed to stay like incredibly loyal to its grassroots and the democratic movement that kind of in some ways gave birth to it. And I think we see a lot. I think we can definitely look in the UK, in America, across Europe, examples of how progressive and formally radical political movements have been sort of co-opted and absorbed into kind of the status quo through their participation in political systems because of the kind of compromises that need to be made, to the quest to seem legitimate and the pressure to kind of conform to the dominant political system. And the HDP has managed in many ways to not do that, to remain, militantly for their ideals while still engaging in the formal political process. And therefore, it's a very dangerous political threat to Erdogan's Turkey, to the current regime. And I think that is giving them the reason to try to eliminate them because they haven't been able to absorb them. And then it's interesting to reflect on, well, okay, if they get rid of the HDP, if they ban it, what will happen? And because the Kurdish movement is so well organized in Turkey, in northern Kurdistan, and has really strong partnerships, like through the HDP with women's rights organizations, with LGBTQ organizations, with general left-wing trade union movements. So we see that as a very threatening situation for Turkey. So they need to then give some kind of place where all those movements can let off steam, can channel the energy. And so then you do see a little bit this kind of creation of this sort of soft pro-Kurdish narrative within the Turkish government in order to kind of make people feel that they can invest in that instead of investing in the HDP. I personally don't think anyone will buy it. I guess I've encountered how well organized, how well politically educated, and how much political clarity there is within the Kurdish movement across Kurdistan. So I feel quite confident that people know, what they're asking for, and they're not asking for a light version of the HDP. They want the HDP, and they want it because it's aligned with their grassroots social movements, and it's aligned with the militant self-defense that's happening across Kurdistan as well. So I think that's something to bear in mind. That I think that Turkey might be being a bit too ambitious in some ways, because the resistance is going to be very strong and very well organized.
So it's almost you're saying that the HDP is an articulation of a political current and a desire that's there. So removing the HDP doesn't remove that political current or pressure or movement.
Exactly. We should certainly fight for the HDP and, as much as possible resist that. But I think it's important to remember that, it is a manifestation of that political current, as you said, and that political current is strong, it's well organized, it's rooted in its history of resistance, and it's very, it knows what it's fighting for, and that's really powerful.
So the final thing that I want to talk to you about, and I want to give a little bit of time to this, because it's on the face of it, it's sort of, you look at it and you think it's sort of a bit silly, but actually there's quite a lot of stuff going on here. So this is a story from yesterday. This is a sentence I never expected to read. Hillary and Chelsea Clinton developing female Kurdish militia drama for TV. So essentially they have a production company, and they've optioned a book which hasn't been published yet. I think it's out in the middle of next month, by Gail Tzemak Lemon, and it's called The Daughters of Kabani, a story of rebellion, courage and justice. And the Clintons are adapting this for the small screen. The reason why I wanted to talk to you about this is I think there's been a sort of there is a mythologizing, isn't there, of female fighters in Syria, and you've been there, you've spent time there. These are real people. These are not ideas. They are flesh and blood human beings. So I guess there's a couple of things here. Does this help kind of, does this further encourage that kind of mythologizing? And I guess, is there a way, is there such a thing as kind of bad publicity, I guess? Because I mean, we want people to know about this, don't we? But we don't want them to see a kind of the wrong perception of it, because this is a real thing that's happening now. It's not, it's not a historical drama. There's quite a lot to unpack here, isn't there?
Yeah, there certainly is. And it's a really interesting question. I've had actually quite a few people message me the link to that story since they've seen it, going, well, this is weird. And it's true. It is weird. And it is, kind of funny in some ways. And I think it's not a simple, yes or no. Is it good or is it bad? Is it good publicity? Is it bad publicity? If you look at the dynamics, that YPJ fighters have been met with globally, there is rightfully so, a huge admiration and respect. And I think it is definitely possible to see them as heroes as well as being human, right? And actually to celebrate the fact that within the human, we all have the potential to be these heroes without losing our humanity. In fact, it's a product of humanity because it comes from our compassion and our hope and our belief in a better world. at the same time, there's, that fetishization of kind of like, picking the most beautiful ones and making them out to these like exotic, creatures who just come from the, sunset with their AK-47s, like, kill some fascists and like ride back off into that sunset. And they are humans, and they're also political agents. They're people who have thought a lot about what they're fighting for, what their political worldview is, why it's important that they, as women, are resisting fascism, and what role they're playing in history. And I feel like they should be the ones who decide how that expression is made to the wider world. And so that's possible through mainstream media. That's 100% possible. A well-informed, well-written, well-researched documentary or film or drama can actually tell that story, and people want that story to be told. That said, the women of the YPJ are, broadly speaking, almost without exception, anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist and anti-state. And I wouldn't say that Hillary Clinton or Chelsea Clinton are any of those things. So then ask those questions of which thread of the story is going to be told? What's going to be brought out a bit more? Is it just this kind of, badass women fighting evil Muslims kind of narrative, which exists in America? I spent quite some time in America in my life, and that is definitely a narrative that exists. Or is it going to be these like incredibly deep, complex, and well-informed women who are taking a stand against global neoliberal capitalism, and state authoritarianism and state fascism? And I don't know what you think, but I think it's probably not going to be the one that actually most of the YPJ women would want to be told.
I mean, I think if we're going to be really diplomatic, it's based on a book neither of us have read, and it's not out yet. So maybe that's the kindest thing we could say. I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it? I mean, what do you think of things? Because there's the French film, Girls of the Sun. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't. No, I've seen the trailer, and I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because they choose to they don't reference the YPJ. They call them something else, but it's very clear what they're talking about. And I don't know. That was it's a strange one because it didn't really talk about it. It made it a very kind of personal story, which I think is, I mean, that's important because it's important to have, to feel empathy for other human beings and the struggles they're going through. But there isn't a very strong political dimension to it. That's the thing, and I think I think the concern is that it's potentially exploitative.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think for me it's exploitative, but also it depoliticizes it. Like you said, I think, yes, like our personal stories are very woven into this wider political narrative. I went to Rojava because a good friend of mine died there, and I wanted to bear witness to kind of her memory and what she died for. But I also went because I'm a political organizer, and I have strong beliefs about what kind of world I want to live in and how I can build that world up, right? So these things exist alongside each other. And if we only focus on one, then we lose the richness of that story and that ability for it to speak to absolutely anybody in the world. Everyone has lost someone. Everyone has that kind of human element, and that's actually the doorway through which we can connect with that wider political picture as well. That said, when you read a lot of the media coverage, both in sort of mainstream drama, TV, film media, but also news coverage, there is this actually quite eerie depoliticization of what's happening in Northeast Syria. The Kurds who want their own territory have done X, Y, or Z. And that's not the situation. It's not a bunch of Kurdish people saying we want a place where only Kurdish people live. It's a very multi-ethnic project. It's very diverse in the people who will participate in it and the people who benefits. They are fighting a revolution for democracy, environmental sustainability, and women's liberation. And you don't see it. It's not hard to say, right? It's three things. Most news stories can say three things, but they don't. They only make it seem as if it's like an ethno-nationalist project, a completely like Kurdish separatist project. And it's not. It's part of a really wide political project that actually spans the whole world because it's in conversation with political movements around the world.
And it's 55% Arab.
Yeah.
And of course, and Turkmen and Chaldean and Syriac and yeah. So what would be your final message to well, hopefully you'll come back again another time for this program. What's your final message to the people watching this?
I guess I can only speak from my perspective, and that is as, a radical grassroots activist who's spent time, living and working and fighting and drinking tea and laughing alongside people who live in Northeast Syria. I'm not like a lobbyist. I'm not like a policy wonk. Like, I can't give you really detailed policy suggestions for the region, but I know that the people who live there are given so much strength in Rojava and across all of Kurdistan, also in southeastern Turkey. What they say is international solidarity gives us the space, the air to breathe as we do our struggle. And that's both by confronting the damage that our governments are doing across Kurdistan, but also just lending strength to know that, we are fighting side by side, even if there's, thousands of miles and oceans between us, that we are also kind of on this same path towards this kind of new world we're trying to build. So my biggest encouragement is express that solidarity in any way that you can, whether it's, through the media, through educating yourself, through donating money to grassroots projects in Northeast Syria and across Kurdistan. And ideally, get politically active, get involved in your local, Kurdistan solidarity group, and take a stand. Don't think of it as something that's happening over there and that's separate from something that's happening over here. Bring it into your own life and see how you can weave those threads into how you approach, your day-to-day life and where you put your energy and what kind of dreams you have for the sort of world you want to live in.
Thank you, Viyan. That was a perfect way to end this program. Thank you for watching. As I said at the beginning, you can directly support the creation of more content like this by going to Patreon, which is patreon.com/Freedom for Ocalan. You can follow us on Twitter @OcalanFree. If you want to support the trade union campaign by affiliating your branch or region or committee, you can do that at our website, which is www.freedomforocalan.org. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.